Welcome back to World Truth Network. Today, we're continuing our series on divorce and remarriage. This is part 3, titled Paul and Jesus, Different Context, One Message, where we'll delve into the Greek terms used in Scripture and their implications for marriage and divorce. If you've been following along, you know we're uncovering God's design for divorce and remarriage, so stay tuned for some eye-opening insights. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share to support this channel and help spread these teachings. Before we begin today's discussion, I want to make something clear. I am not advocating for divorce or remarriage, but rather sharing the biblical stance that I hold on the matter. This is my understanding of what the Bible teaches, and I believe it to be true. My aim is to present the biblical perspective on divorce and remarriage, not to encourage anyone to take these steps. I hope that through this, you'll gain a deeper understanding of what Scripture says about the subject. With that in mind, let's continue with part 3 of Divorce and Remarriage, a Biblical Perspective. Part 3, Paul and Jesus, Different Contexts, One Message. The Greek word that Paul used in 1 Corinthians 7, verse 10 to 11 is chorizo, which means to separate or to divide. It doesn't necessarily carry the formal legal connotation of divorce, as in permanently dissolving a marriage, but rather implies a physical or relational separation. In contrast, when Jesus speaks about divorce in passages like Matthew 5, verse 31 to 32, or Matthew 19, verse 3 to 9, the Greek word used is apolio, which more explicitly means to release or to send away, often referring to a formal act of divorce. So yes, Paul uses chorizo to refer to separation, which could happen without legally ending the marriage, while Jesus uses apolio, which is more directly tied to divorce. This distinction aligns with Paul's advice in 1 Corinthians 7, verse 11, where he allows for separation but encourages reconciliation or remaining unmarried, reflecting his focus on preserving the marriage bond. In 1 Corinthians 7, verse 11, when Paul says, "But, and if she depart," the Greek word chorizo refers to separation, not necessarily divorce. Then at the end, when he says, "Let not the husband put away his wife," the Greek aphine, put away, typically refers to a more formal action like divorce. So Paul's instructions suggest that if the wife separates, perhaps due to conflict or other issues, the husband should not escalate it to divorce. Instead, the ideal would be reconciliation or maintaining the marital bond without pursuing a permanent dissolution of the marriage. It reflects Paul's broader emphasis on preserving the unity of marriage wherever possible. Paul used a different Greek word in 1 Corinthians 7:11 than Jesus did in Matthew 19:9, because the focus and context of their teachings were slightly different. In Matthew 19:9, Jesus uses apolio, which specifically refers to formally divorcing or sending away a spouse. Jesus was addressing the Pharisees' question about the legality of divorce under Mosaic law, and emphasized the seriousness of dissolving a marriage. In contrast, Paul in 1 Corinthians 7:11 uses aphine, which can mean to release or to send away, but it's less technical and formal than apolio. Paul's focus in this passage is pastoral, addressing believers in practical situations where separation might occur. By using aphine, he seems to be advising against abandoning or dismissing a spouse, even in the case of separation, chorizo, rather than commenting directly on formal divorce laws. The difference likely reflects the broader context of their messages, Jesus addressing legal grounds for divorce and Paul emphasizing relational and spiritual reconciliation within the church. In Deuteronomy 24, 1-4, the passage lays out a provision for divorce under Mosaic law. It says that if a man marries a woman and later finds something indecent about her, translated as uncleanness in some versions, he can give her a certificate of divorce and send her away. If she then marries another man, and that second husband divorces her or dies, the first husband is forbidden to remarry her, as this would be seen as an abomination. Historically, this passage was often misunderstood and misapplied by the Pharisees and others in Jesus' time. The term indecent or uncleanness was debated. Some Jewish teachers, particularly the school of Hillel, interpreted it broadly, allowing divorce for almost any reason, such as cooking poorly or simply not pleasing the husband. Others, like the school of Shammai, were stricter, interpreting it to mean sexual immorality, fornication, or adultery. It's important to note that the penalty for sexual sin under Mosaic law was death. If the issue in Deuteronomy 24:1 referred to sexual immorality, the punishment for that sin would have been stoning, and the woman would not have been able to remarry. Therefore, uncleanness in this context cannot refer to sexual sin because the penalty for such an offense would be death, not divorce. In the time of Jesus, this had led to an abuse of the divorce provision, where men could dismiss their wives for trivial reasons, leaving them vulnerable and without protection. This cultural practice was what the Pharisees were referring to when they questioned Jesus about the legality of divorce.